Now, I know what you're thinking. The Giants and playoffs don't go in a sentence together. And yeah, you're right. They did just have the third overall pick in the draft after all. But if you think about it, every season there's that one team that comes out of nowhere and flips the script, becoming one of the best teams in football right after barely winning 5 games. I mean, think about it. Just the year before, that was the Washington Commanders. They went from having the number 2 overall pick and selecting Jaylen Daniels to going all the way to the NFC Championship game and almost making it to the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying the Giants are the Washington Commanders, but what I am saying is this Giants team is talented enough that with the addition of Russell Wilson and Abdul Carter, they're going to be able to make a playoff run this season. But I don't just think this for no reason. Think about it. The New York Giants haven't had good quarterback play for the last 10 years since Eli Manning had his last good season in 2016. They went through Eli Manning, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and a couple of other no-name QBs in these past few seasons. But ultimately, the Giants have a superstar in their wide receiver room in Malik Nabers, who's by far the best receiver Russell Wilson has ever played with in his career. Now, he's played with some talented guys. I want you to think about DK Metcalf, Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, George Pickens this past year, but ultimately none of these receivers are even close to the level that Malik Nabers is. And this has been evident all throughout Giants training camp. Russell Wilson and Malik Nabers look like they might be the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the entire NFL. As Russell Wilson still has that incredible moonball paired up with Malik Nabers' incredible receiving skills, I don't think there's many teams in the NFL that are going to be able to keep this duo in check. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. The only problem with that is Russell Wilson isn't a good quarterback either anymore. Now, it is true that Russell Wilson is no longer the same guy that he was in his prime, but to call Russell Wilson a bad quarterback just shows that you've been listening to the media's narratives for far too long. I want to rewind it to his first season in Denver. Yes, it was ugly, but you've got to think, he had one of the worst head coaches in NFL history, bad offensive line play, a terrible running game, and a mediocre receiving core, along with constant injuries that plagued him throughout the entire season and a bad offensive system. Now, what about year 2 in Denver? It looked much better. It still wasn't perfect because the Broncos still couldn't run the ball, had a middle-of-the-pack offensive line, had those same offensive weapons, and Sean Payton, a coach who pretty much made it obvious that he hated Russell Wilson with a passion. But it got a lot better. So much so that Russell Wilson almost took the Broncos to the playoffs, which is crazy considering in year 2, that defense completely fell apart. This is why when Russell Wilson got cut by the Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers came running immediately. They got to get Russell Wilson, a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, on a vet min contract to lead them to the playoffs once again. And what happened in Pittsburgh? Well, the first half of the season for Russell Wilson made it seem like that bet paid off. He was definitely looking like a top 10 quarterback throughout that time. So much so that he ended up making the Pro Bowl in this season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The last half of the season, the Steelers fell apart. But this wasn't fully on Russell Wilson. The play calling by Arthur Smith was mediocre at best. George Pickens got hurt down the stretch and came back as a complete diva. The running game was mediocre, averaging about 3 yards per carry. The offensive line play was very inconsistent because of Broderick Jones and Dan Moore falling off near the end of the season. And oh yeah, that Pittsburgh Steelers defense that's always dominant completely fell apart down the stretch last season. So much so that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens kind of had their way with them in the playoffs. And even if you look at the playoff game, Russell Wilson didn't play bad. He played good enough for them to win if the defense played a good game. But considering the offensive game plan sucked in the first quarter, where they punted multiple times on 4th and 1 or shorter, and ultimately the Ravens didn't get stopped but one time the entire game, there was no shot that Russell Wilson was going to be able to carry them for a deep run into the playoffs. But now he's in New York. And why do I think he's ultimately going to take New York further? As I mentioned earlier, Malik Nabers. Let's see what Malik Nabers had to say about his quarterback.
He's put the ball in some crazy spots that I thought would never get to me, but it made it there. Or just like I said, the moon ball is easy to catch. He drops it right in the bucket. He's able to put the ball in position that only his receiver can catch the ball. So it's been one of those great attributes of him as he's been playing in the league for so long.
But it's not just Malik Nabers. The Giants also have Darius Slayton, Jaylen Hyatt, and Wan'Dale Robinson, all of which are great at catching those deep balls that Russell Wilson's known for. Now, it's not perfect on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line looks decent, but they don't have much depth, so if injuries start to pile up, the Giants may be screwed on the offensive end. And the running backs, Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, and Cam Thibodeaux, are all mediocre at best, but Tyrone Tracy and Cam Thibodeaux can make a decent duo if they both stay healthy all season long. But ultimately, it's not offense that wins games in the NFL, it's defense. And the Giants had one of the best defenses in the NFL last season, and that was before they added Javon, Holland, and Paulson Adebo on that back end as well. But the scariest part of their defense isn't the secondary, it's the D-line. In fact, the Giants actually have the best defensive line in the entire NFL. They have Kavon Thibodeaux, who was a number 5 overall pick in the draft just a few years back and has played decent over the past few seasons, but is set to have a year 3 breakout as he's been dominant in training camp. They have Brian Burns, who is one of the highest paid outside linebackers in the entire NFL because how great he's been at rushing the passer the past 5+ years of his career, that started out in Carolina and is now in New York with the Giants. You also have Dexter Lawrence, who is without a doubt the best defensive tackle in football. He's so good that in 12 games last season, he was able to record 9 sacks from the interior D-line. And in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New York Giants added the best defensive player on the board, Abdul Carter from Penn State, with the number 3 overall pick. Abdul Carter has been absolutely dominant in training camp for the New York Giants, and it looks as though he may be in store for a 10+ sack season. And if he can live up to these expectations, it's without a doubt in my mind that the Giants are going to have a top 5 defense in the NFL for the 2025 season. And as they say, defense wins championships, which means it also wins football games. Meaning, even though the Giants have the hardest schedule in the NFL this season, with that defensive line, they're going to be able to make some noise in the stacked NFC East this season. So despite Vegas predicting the Giants to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this season, with their win total only being 5.5 wins, I ultimately think the Giants are going to win at least 10 games this season and make it into the 2025 NFL playoffs. But with that being said, they do have the hardest schedule in the NFL, so anything can happen. But don't be shocked when the Giants give your favorite team a run for their money. Hit that subscribe button down below if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to give me a like and let me know down below what you think about the Giants. And remember to come back to this video at the end of the year when you see the Giants in the playoffs.